Maybe the word art is a bit too much, but what would you expect to see on a bag like this? All catalog pics are CAD 3D drawings and they look very nice. Apart from the wrong position of the barrel handles, there isn't anything to complain about. These pics made Dan and me really itchy to get our hands on the 50s. Here's something we'll have to talk about. The receiver looks exactly like this on the resin body. Again, no difference between picture and actual part. You'll see it soon and probably won't believe it. Of course the muzzles are rolled out. Handle and butterfly trigger. Wait for the pics of this part. On the drawing, the loading handle and mechanism look fantastic. I was wondering how they will have done the front side. The answer is they didn't. It's missing completely. As I said, you won't believe it. The bolt heads on the resin M2 don't look like this. That goes for this one too. This lever is represented. The better part of the rear side is there, but the ranges are missing. It would be naive to expect them to be there because they're very small in the actual 50 cal. Of course, Dan and I hoped that there'd be something, but there wasn't. As I said, these CAD drawings are very nice, but they don't show the set parts. These appear to be 3D scans of an actual machine gun. In my opinion, it comes quite close to a scam because one would expect to see drawings of the resin parts. The set contains 6 plugs, 3 for the bodies and handles and 3 for the barrels. Only one loading handle has snapped off. Not bad for a small bag that traveled around half the world from Taiwan. This is what I call crisp. I never saw sharp details like these on styrene parts. I told you that the receivers look like the actual ones, didn't I? Here we have something that looks like flesh, but I'm sure this was done deliberately. The bracket for the handles is way too delicate to be done without this bit of resin in the center. You can imagine that removing it isn't easy, especially since it's much thicker than real flesh. Here we have the loading mechanism and the upper part of the handles. You're looking at it from the underside, so there's no need to be disappointed. Look at the rear side. It's as thin as PE. Here's the locator for the barrel. Another view from the butterfly trigger, this time from the top. You'll see better pics of it, but believe me, it's beautifully done. And here's the barrel. There are many very fine gates, but this way it was possible to do the barrel handle in resin instead of PE. Unfortunately, the barrel's front quarter is bent. Although I like the resin handle, the thought of cleaning it up left me scared to death. The muzzle looks really nice, and it'll look even better after painting it up. After removing the plug from the machine gun's body, I thought I was looking at a part of my high-speed tractor. You can see it, it's off-center and I wasn't the least bit happy about it. Well, it's the underside and it won't be visible. There'll be the MG cradle to cover it. Here's what needs to be cleaned up. I didn't go crazy about it and just shaved off the bigger gates and only sanded them till they were flat enough to look good from the side. As I said, this will be hidden, so there was no need to do more than that. For cleaning the hole, I used a matching drill bit. Removing the resin from the bracket ended up the way I expected. One end snapped off. There's no need to worry about it as long as you don't use bits like this to feed the carpet monster. Resin parts are much easier to repair than styrene parts because CA glue doesn't melt the material. All in all, I can't deny that I was a bit disappointed up to this point. Looking at the butterfly trigger and the loading mechanism was enough to make me feel much better again. This is something that can't be replicated in PE because PE parts are flat. Doing rounded shapes is close to being impossible, and that's why I'll always prefer resin or even styrene for parts like these. Removing the plug from the barrel wasn't as difficult as I had thought. The resin is quite flexible, so the handle was still there after cutting off the gates. You already saw that the barrel is bent. You could try to correct this with a bath of hot water, but I didn't. Here the handle snapped off, but I glued it back on again. Looks like I cleaned it up properly. Oh no, not really. That's better, but I had to drill out the hole with a 1.1mm drill bit. My opinion up to now, nice, but definitely not perfect. The first part I wanted to glue to the body was the loading handle. I was a bit distracted, so my tweezers became a rocket launcher. I only had a rough idea on the direction the handle went, but I couldn't find it. My vacuum cleaner and a piece of cloth did the job. You can see it between all the dust and dirt. Gluing it to the body was very easy because there are perfect locators on both parts. Next came the upper part of the handles for the trigger. Again precise locators, so this part sits in its correct position. Another view of the beautifully replicated butterfly trigger. Now I had 2 points to attach the piece of bracket to. This was a simple task and you can't see that it was damaged before. After gluing the barrel into place, I noticed that I never saw this cross member before, so I asked Dan about it. He confirmed what I had thought, and so I cut it off. I talked about the missing front sight before. It had to be scratch built because it is a crucial part. I used an arrow strip of 0.1mm brass sheet. Then I bent it around a 0.6mm drill bit. It doesn't only look tiny. The grain was also missing, so I made one from brass sheet too. It was bent into an L shape. I also made a new frame for it. After gluing both parts into place, I was almost happy, but the grain sits too far off of the frame. It's very likely that I'll give it a third attempt, but I had enough of it at that moment. In my opinion, it looks okay, but as I said, I'm not completely happy with the result. Here we have the completed Live-Resin 50 cal and the upgraded Tamiya one. The resin body shows crisper details, but it's amazing that a 30-year-old styrene pot still looks that nice. I like the RB model barrel better than the resin one, not only because the latter is bent. I'll come to my conclusion in a couple of seconds, but in case you never used resin before, please read the following. I paid €14.09 for this set, shipping included, so one of these Brownings was €4.70. Not overly expensive these days, but is it sensible to buy this set? At this point I would have said no, because of the misaligned body, the missing front sights and the bent barrel. Again, it was Dan who changed my opinion, because he said that the barrel of his Live-Resin machine gun was perfectly straight. I took a closer look at the remaining two barrels and found out that I used the only bent one for this review. I also looked at the two bodies that were left, and at least one of them is perfect. I wasn't very lucky with my choice of parts, was I? Making resin parts is a craft, and as far as I know, it can't be done with machines. There's always a risk of damaged parts, be it because they're misshapen, be it because of inclusions, or be it because something snapped off. There aren't any inclusions, and the misaligned or bent parts were bad luck. For the M2 I built for this review, there's one thing I could do to rescue it. I could cut off the barrel and use the RB model one. The sizes of these two barrel handles are very different. The resin one appears to be way too big, and Dan told me that the PE one is too small. I won't remove the plugs carefully anymore because I'll replace the handles. The rest of the barrel is nice and absolutely usable. Using the RB model upgrade set for each of these machine guns would make them twice as expensive. If you aren't completely insane, you won't do that and will be glad with the amount of details you get with this set. Am I impressed? Yes and no. Would I buy this set again? I'd check out 3 different styrene sets before I would. Would I recommend the set? If you want something special and are willing to take the risk of damaged parts, I'd say yes. This set is difficult to come by, so there may be huge differences with regards to the price you'd have to pay. It's up to you how much you want to spend on them, but these 14 euros were the absolute limit for me. The body's details are the nicest I ever saw on a 50 cal, and that'll be difficult to beat. The styrene sets I mentioned are more expensive, but there are also more machine guns included. Nevertheless, they'd have to be almost perfect to beat the details of this set. Its main advantage, even ahead of the details, is the material. There's nothing like resin, at least not for me.
That's all, folks.